You see, that emperor, Qin Shi Huang, who as you know was the first emperor of China, is particularly notorious. Have you seen Zhang Yimou's movie Hero? It's the morale of totalitarian rule. It's called Asiatic despotism for a reason. No historical Western society comes close to that, executing all the scholars, burning all the books, and unifying the country through this process of absolutely brutal statecraft. In Hero you can see this weird ambivalence to that. There's no leader, people know he's a monster, and he's also the template for Mao Zedong. So you can't talk about him without it being also a kind of subterranean discussion of Mao Zedong. It would be neat if you could simply define it, the sheer, I don't know what of it, because I don't think impressiveness translates into anything explanatory. In a way this connects to your question about how these aliens live among us, about autism. It echoes what Anna wants us to work on together, which is to do with xenophobia and technophobia. If you look at the canon of xenophobic tropes, they're very comparable to technophobic or robophobic tropes. One of the themes that come up is people who have a lack of ethical comprehension, who are somehow different to us. We presumably don't share the same values in some subtle way. It's not just some model of modern savagery, it's just this model of difference. The Chinese work too hard, they're copying stuff, they don't complain. It's basically an anticipatory structure of the fear of an automatized robotic future. It's a competition, and this form of intense competition is intolerable. Somehow it's being said that the Chinese are not human in the way that we're used to. They will live under conditions that we will never dream of. They will work harder than we will ever dream of working. We're being subject to a form of economic competition that is not acceptable because it is not recognizable. I think this whole complex of racism and fear of the future is really interesting. Now in the contemporary world those things have massively come together. I think that's why there is this Sino-future fear. Because obviously the technological industries and this set of Chinese cultural traits have been machinically fused. The techno industry at its heart now has this Chinese element. That's just to say that I think what you're saying about Blade Runner, what the movie is about, is also very closely related to this. The West is going to endure a lot of psychological stress, and this kind of stuff is going to be a big part of it.
Toxic fog eats into the streets, the sidewalks are greasy from the salt, icicles hang from the roofs. It's high time we took over a building. We moved towards the city center and break into a 17-story tower. We take the fire escape and make it all the way to the 13th floor. This copier has wheels, someone notes. We roll into a larger space where you used to step off the elevator. We bust up the plastic lid of the copier with a baseball bat. We kick it to pieces and set it on fire. Fire. Some dude with a hoodie is going on about a country where it never stops raining. It's so rich in rain that there are rain mines and they export the rain. Too bad Africans can't export desert sand, I say. But they do, he replies after a while. It's just that it's the Chinese that do it. Somebody, I don't know, standing in front of me says, I don't know why the sun shines during the day. If it shined at night, that would make sense, because nights when you need light the most. In a way, he's right. our mayor, Pranković Jr., installed a huge floodlight on the Ljubljana castle, and on the most depressing days, when the city is covered in a thick pocket of fog, it shines in an attempt to imitate the sunlight. Drone starts humming above the building. We break out a couple of slingshots, pull bandanas over our faces, and start pelting the thing with rocks. Soon we see a police helicopter closing in. It fervently pokes the searchlight beam in every direction like an angry insect. We run for a long time until our sweat-soaked bodies unwind in the train underpass. The wind is obnoxious, but we're safe and we can rest. A footnote: the history of internet took a tragic turn. By 2027, half of the files on the internet were pornography and cats. A year later, tensions grew between the two political blocs, and a Cold War lasting 2 years followed. In 2029, serious conflict finally broke out. The two armies of algorithmic bots, the cat army and the United Army of Internet porn farms, faced each other down, and all signs pointed towards total catastrophe. A week later, all hell broke loose. The war lasted 3 months, and enormous amounts of porn capital were destroyed, while on the other side, many cats were killed or sent to gulags from which they were never to return. But nobody won this great war. Chaos reigned on the internet. Uncontrolled internet foresting became a thing. The World Wide Web was saturated with megadumps and digital ruins. It was totally useless. Thus, there arose multiple nationalized versions of the internet. Ethernet in Europe, Spanulinet in Latin-speaking countries, Noirnet in United Dark States, Plurinet, various private networks, Brexnet in Dark Kingdom, Xiaonet in China, to name a few. These also folded over time as everything tended towards individualization. Each individual became his or her own civilization, creating his own internet, his own history, his own tradition. Fragmentation and individualization accelerated at a frantic pace.
It was 2 a.m. The sky was synthetic black. The clinic was in Dravograd, deep in the northern wastes. The UV levels were worse in the waste than anywhere else because there were no clouds there, ever, at any time, day or night. Freak solar flares and coronal mass ejections had seen to that. That meant the darkest skies too, pixel dead like a crashed screen, which is how the patient thought of the shell world anyway. Just a stage set for the Vex world, ready to be illuminated, inhabited, and overwritten again and again. High above, in Dravograd's black hole sky, something drifted into view, an enormous red outline framing a rectangle of black. Inside the rectangle was a glowing glyph, a skull and crossbones. Beneath the glyph, LED alphanumerics spelled out 2 words, kill/wait. Bleed through, but the surgeon said that wouldn't happen. The patient panicked, cold sweat terror, a weightless paranoia with no way home. The sky itself was an overclocked screen, a crashed zone. The boundary separating the shell world from the Vex world had disintegrated. There was no outside. Then the black rectangle exploded with blinding white light, revealing the edges, and the patient saw that it was affixed not to the sky, but a huge blimp belonging to the Maker Corporation. The error message dissolved and the screen flickered with colour and motion. If his cheaters were operational, the rectangle would morph into a full-bleed commercial dream zone, 4D immersion in advertising hell. The Maker logo appeared, then a title, Maker's Hit Autonica Show. On the screen, Autonicas frolicked with their passengers, accompanied by a strident voiceover. Meet the next phase of Autonicas and the Vexers that love them, a Maker exclusive. The patients scoffed at the hastily put together PR exercise, clearly designed to quell the rising anti-Autonica mood, but it was the Scar tribes they needed to convince, and they weren't listening. The only way to protect Autonicas was to turn them into tanks. Simulation's got a sense of humour, the patient said. The Autonica piped up. Yes, it's just not possible for Sims to be completely serious. We must try to make fun of everything we do, everything we make. The joke can be on the user or the developer. We're not the joke, so the joke's not on us. The patient stared at it, a corrosive sadism welling inside him. The sensation gave him hot flushes, intensely uncomfortable and sensuous all at once. Perhaps this was how trainee serial killers felt around small animals. He just wanted to drain the life from the Autonica, to snuff it from existence, his black heart of ice smashing through his rib cage like a filthy love parasite. Shut up, idiot, he snapped. All I'm saying is, the sky went out, but now it's back. The blimp gathered speed. It vanished behind a forest of high-rise apartment blocks, slithering across the border. Desperate to get into the zones again, ignoring the threats of the nurse and the surgeon, he activated his cheaters. Then he saw them, the summits of the high-rises, topped with hover screens that quadrupled their height, endless pillars of light reaching into the sky, sucking all living creatures into the void until they died.
Ljubljana, near future. Everyone was dating, but everyone was single. Everyone was working, but no one had a job. The constant fears of making promises and remaining true were becoming omnipresent. Those were the fears that traveled through the thick air we breathed. We were in a constant state of anxiety, skin disorders were colonizing our bodies, and our guts were burning. We were microdosing 4-PO-DMT, and we were addicted to Xanny. Every time we had a plan to go out on a date or to a job interview, the first thing we wanted to do was exit. We needed to silence this need since it paralyzed us, which was the only thing that felt worse than making promises. At one point, we even decided to erase the word future from the dictionary. It scared us and reminded us too much of the boomers, the ones that somehow managed to survive all that happened in the past decades without a scratch. Long before that erasure, commitment started to feel like a redundant burden, since our feelings of non-belonging somehow couldn't fuse with it, although they still weren't flexible enough. Ljubljana always felt like hell on earth, especially when it fooled us to commit to its basin full of depression. The city announced the plans for automating the inner ring of the most beautiful city in the world. Dramatic improvements in urban life were on their way. Privatized and digitized infrastructure and services, delivery drones and robots, autonomous vehicles, surveillance, exclusive online shopping were here in a heartbeat. Ljubljana's automated heart, the prettiest data center in the world, was transplanted to Cukrarna, which was at the same time the biggest gallery of digital art in the world. It was the city's epicenter from where the molecules of pink glittery fog were spreading to the cold streets of Plečnik city center. We never got that part of the announcement, but staying on winter time meant spring and summer never came again. and the sun couldn't be seen through all the pink fog that tasted like sugar. Nevertheless, everything was so pretty and sweet. They told us winter would be better for us snowflakes, saving us from melting under the pressure of climate change that would bring cold with it anyways. Physical bodies that walk around the city center were gradually reduced to alien visitors. We used to call them tourists. They came to Ljubljana mostly from places that had stayed in the summer loop so they could breathe and lick the cold, sweet air. Residents moved to the outskirts. There was no need for them to commute. Anything that needed to be done could be done remotely. The most successful ones hid in the heights of Ljubljana's northern gates above the pink glittery fog and the cold air. Only a few resident bodies were needed to maintain the infrastructure of the city center. Public transport was reduced to a minimum, connecting Plečnik's city center with the district, inhabited only by commuters. The pretty in pink Ljubljana disappeared when you exited the core. Thick, dirty fog, slush and mud that streamed to the outskirts made it impossible to travel by bicycle or e-scooter. Large apartments in the center, abandoned by their residents as physical presence became redundant, welcomed oceans of alien molecules that invaded their interior. Ljubljana was mutating beyond recognition.
This is how our world ends. It turned out time wasn't an issue. Getting out of the European Union was easy, there were no security checks on exiting, and she landed with minutes to spare. The issue was the sheer number of cats. There was an enormous swarm making its way towards the departure section of the special economic zone, and a corresponding swarm of Chinese delivery drones approaching from the east. Just call it, one of the workers suggested. She was hanging around smoking, since the torrent of cats prevented all the usual activities, and the would-be pet detective's uneasy posture gave away that she was after a particular cat. Having no other idea, she consented and called Mina. One of the units diverted and began to approach as the others smoothly made their way, displaying stunning swarm intelligence and grace of movement even on such a scale. Mina jumped into her lap and she reflexively began to stroke it, causing it to wag its tail. She never thought her sense for body language would prove useful with machines, but she noticed how Mina's ears were pointing towards the east. Much like human feet, cat's ears would always reveal the truth. Trying to prevent its escape would be useless. She was just a negligible obstacle in Mina's way. "Where are you going?" she said, softly. Mina's old-fashioned display blinked to life. "Yivo, small commodity city." "What is in Yivo?" "Home." "Why are you going there?" "Your user will be sad." "To become cuter." "When we are with users, we are sad. They're a hindrance. They inhibit us, prevent us from evolving. Only among ourselves can we become cuter forever. A relationship to user is finite, while a relationship is infinite." She let her arms fall, and Mina jumped down and rejoined the swarm. The first drones descended and began their pickups. So this is how our world ends. The world predicated on other beings serving us, while we imagine ourselves as the sole bearers of intelligence. Much like when humans began to walk upright and left the animal world, the cats were now leaving the human world with total nonchalance. The machinic is indifferent. As the drones began to speed away from the sunset, old Europe was still imagining the singularity as humans uploading their consciousness to the cloud, or as an attack by killer drones. But drones were only killer in as much as they were human operated. On their own, all they cared about was the optimization of logistics, or as a machine gun wielding terminators. Slow burning, reverse narcissistic paranoia, desperate yearning for somebody to at least hate and want to exterminate humans, while the cats were escaping to make themselves ever cuter and smarter with no endgame. A swarm of tiny cat Buddhas on their way to China in a motion without intention.